and welcome to Engage at Health, which is MedCity News' patient experience and engagement summit here at Health. I have with me AJ Loyakono, CEO of CapRx, and I am Arundhati Parmar. I'm the editor-in-chief of MedCity News. So the session title is, What is an Ethical PBM? So let's start there. Why do you think the current group of PBMs that we have are not ethical?
Well, I think it goes back to this concept of encumbering price. You know, once upon a time, PBMs just charged a flat fee per script or PMPM basis to administrate prescription plans on behalf of payers. And then somewhere along the line, it was a great marketing idea. Someone had this concept, what if we told the payers it was free and we could keep something in the middle? The middle being between the buy and the sell side, the buy side being the ultimate payer, the sell side being the pharmacies and the manufacturers. And people gobbled it up. The payers loved it. They're like, oh, it's free, right? But nothing's free. And what happened was, because they could control price, you know, there's really no regulation in self-insured business. I mean, what is it, Department of Labor? In addition to that, no one could see or understand price. And when I started in the industry, coming from manufacturing, I thought the manufacturing industry for prescriptions, for pharmaceutical products, behaved just like semiconductors or sneakers. But when you actually look at the last hop in the supply chain, nothing makes sense. It looks like the price of drug changes every hour of every day for every patient, for every drug. And the reality is, and I've said this 1,000 times, drug prices in the United States are incredibly stable. You know, brand drugs, you could set a clock to it, changes price January and July, and generics deflate. So what's unethical is this concept of I can mark up a drug to be anything. I could use this highly opaque and complex classification system that makes no sense. There's no standard. And they do it only, again, to create higher profit margin and better economics. And so I believe this time has come and we're changing.
So let's ask you this. We have vertically integrated PBMs now that are owned by large corporations that are both insurance company and have retail pharmacies. Should this structure be legal in the United States?
Well, I mean, I think vertical integration has its merits. I think how it's paid needs to change. And so I think I go back to, again, you know, when you have something that owns multiple ends of the supply chain, it's okay. There should be efficiency and better ways to administrate the plan on behalf of the members. But I think what's missing again is, why are they able, for prescriptions, they able to mark it up? And I think about this all the time, which is if you have a medical program on the medical insurance side, you can't mark up arbitrarily the price of the procedure, but you can mark up a prescription to be anything you want on a traditional pricing model. And so, again, I just think there's nothing wrong necessarily with vertical integration, but I think people, when it comes to prescriptions, you need to decide, are you going to be an administrator or are you going to be in the fulfillment business, like you own a pharmacy or you're a manufacturer? I think that's fine. But the moment you take on the role of being an administrator, it's an awesome responsibility you share with the fiduciary. You know, at that point, you must have no conflicts of interest. And the inherent conflict of interest with spread pricing is you make more money on more expensive drugs. You make more money on approving high-cost medications. And so this needs to change, because if you're an administrator, you remove all that pressure, you could focus on better service and better outcomes.
So for those that don't know, can you define spread pricing, please?
Yeah, so spread pricing, we talk about the buy and sell side. The buy side being the ultimate payer. This could be an employer group. This could be a state Medicaid plan. This could be the federal government. And then the sell side is really pharmacies at retail. And then you also have a supply chain, because you have what I call this asymmetric warfare of value that comes through pharmaceutical manufacturers. And that comes in the form of rebates and price protection and coupons and patient assistance. And so what's happening is, instead of just administrating and just making a flat fee and having all the dollars flow through to the plan and the patient, everybody's taking a cut, everyone being traditional administrators of PBM or vertically integrated services. And so this is a real problem. You know, I often say that we should have changed this a long time ago, but for whatever reason, economic pressures, it never changed.
So the FTC is probing PBMs, including the three largest PBMs in the country, of course, CVS, Cigna, and the third one just escapes me.
United?
United.
Yes.
How could I forget that? The largest insurance company in the world. So do you expect anything to come out of this FTC probe?
I mean, I always want to say I have the highest level of respect for the Federal Trade Commission and DOJ. I've certainly had myself some interesting conversations there, so they're certainly asking the right questions. I think what comes of it is up to them. Personally, I've never created a business model that relied upon government intervention or regulation. I think it's helpful, but I think ultimately you can do it yourself with efficiency, never taking the gray dollars, because once you take the spread dollars, I don't care if it's manufacturer or spread at distribution, you're tied to those earnings. Your board expects those earnings. Your budgets are set to that. And then how can you ever go back? And so the future is focusing on efficiency, and that's what our company has been doing, which is there are two lines in healthcare, and people forget about this all the time. One is top line, purchasing power. If you're in the spread pricing business, it's how much money do I make on that drug? And so the other line that people forget about is what does it cost to administrate the plan? What's your overhead? That's your net revenue. And this is what's been lost is you have an industry that's always benefited from ever increasing drug prices. And I say ever increasing list prices. I do want to take a point, and this is important to remember when we talk about ethics. Since 2014, net prices for brand and specialty has been negative. I want everyone in this room to have that set in. Drug prices are negative for brand and specialty since 2014. The curve completely inverted. And for generic drugs, for the last 10 years, it probably deflates 10 to 15%. Just ask any pharmaceutical manufacturer in the generic space. And so if outside of utilization and drug mix, if everything is negative, why does anyone have a positive trend? And it shouldn't. And this is what bothers me about it, is everyone's used to drug prices just going up, but what's happening is net prices are going down and profitability for what lies in between has been soaring for the last decade.
So you're blaming PBMs, but PBMs blame pharmaceutical companies. Who is actually in the wrong?
If this was the year 2000, you could blame pharma. I come from pharma. However, why did this shift? Like, why does the blame shift? Because right around 2004, we moved to a pay-to-play economic structure of market access. You know, you want to be on my formulary, pay me. And it started out as something benign, like, hey, you give me a little bit more. I put people on tier 2. There has to be a $15 copay difference for tier 1 and tier 2. And then the PBMs recognized they could make so much money on it that they started to look at ways in which they could have exclusive formularies or exclusions, which is, I'll get rid of your competitors, pay me twice as much. And what happened during this period of time, which is so fascinating to see, is you also have, if you think about it, when you have the perfect model, which is definitely pharmacy benefits, you don't innovate, you consolidate. And that's exactly what happened. And so when you consolidate, the purchasing power shifted from a fragmentation of blues and regional carriers and upstart PBMs to 3 jumbo entities that controlled 25 to 30% market share. Even with GPOs, I probably would say it could be 30% each for each. And so suddenly you have a situation where pharma can't say no. And so if you look at gross to net for pharma, I'm not saying they're blameless in this, it looks like it's going from 50 to 49 to 48. They're losing profitability over time. And who's gaining that is what lies in between. So who is in control of getting 100% of the dollars? And pharma is quite generous, and generic manufacturers are incredibly frugal in the value they deliver. So who's responsible for that? It's not pharma. And if anyone wants to challenge me on this, just simply look at the stock price of United, Cigna, and CVS in the 21st century, and then overlay Pfizer, Novartis, Sanofi, take your pick. They're all flat. Everything else is up 3,000%. And if you think pharma's not driving that revenue, you should read the 10K in better detail, although they disclose less and less each year.
So you're talking about pharma, you're talking about PBM. It seems to be that the keys to the kingdom in terms of lowering prices is the employer. Employers can choose which PBMs to work with. Isn't that right?
It is. I often say, the conflicts of interest don't just end with the PBM or vertically integrated people. It's who has made money. on the big three. 90% of most broker consultant revenue is coming from the big three. And I'm not to say inherently they're all wrong. I would say there's a good group, maybe 50%, and there's ones that have no interest. You know, they like the status quo. It takes me the same amount of time to use my same old spreadsheet to come to the same old conclusions to make the same amount of revenue. And I think where we're looking at is the employers are starting to wake up, because I'm starting to see this transformative moment where, you know, the tipping point for us has been this past year, and some of the larger partnerships we're going to announce going into the year, where suddenly sophisticated payers, and I use that term sophisticated because they have to be able to see the truth themselves. But when you level set and you say, hey, I'm willing to give you access to my retail pharmacy contracts, they're like, what? Like, I'm willing to give you the check from the manufacturers directly. I don't even want to hold the money. I mean, granted, we're going to pay 100% through, but I want to do something no one's ever done before. You're going to get the payment directly. You know, and when someone signals to the market they're willing to take these steps, something magical happens. The market starts being efficient for the first time. I mean, why haven't we had market efficiency at the payer level? It's because what lied between had full ability to encumber price, to disadvantage the payer and the member, and to make literally uncapped profitability.
So let's talk about CapRx, your company. Obviously, you are setting this up as CapRx is ethical, the rest of the world is not. How do you get paid?
We get paid on a flat administrative fee. You know, there's nothing innovative about this. If you went back in a time machine to the 90s, this is how PBMs made money. You know, you would go in and say, I'm your administrator. I'll work with you and your team to figure out your plan design, reporting schedule. I'll reimburse the network. I'll do the billables, et cetera. I'll print cards and letters around formulary. And you just charged a flat fee. And you know what's beautiful about that? You have complete alignment. Someone comes to you and says, you know what? I want to carve out specialty and go to this partner. If you're not making money on the drugs, you say, sure, how can I help you? Someone says, I'd like to do a direct deal with Amgen on certain drugs. How may I be of assistance should come out of my mouth, not, I don't think that's a good idea. We might have to look at the rebate contract and see how that will impact performance. If you have full alignment and there's no hidden gotcha or economics lying in the murk, this becomes such a rewarding conversation. One of the partners we're working with right now, they're like, no one's ever given me what you've just put in front of me. You know, and I had an all-day meeting and I said, here's my rebate contracts, here's my retail contracts, here's my mail specialty. You can pick and choose from any of these categories. I just want to administrate your plan. And I think together, because this is a sophisticated payer, they have amazing resources and they have great, I think, vision into what the future of healthcare should be for them, which is awesome. And I'm like, tell us what you need us to do. My job is to be a plumber. You know, I say this all the time. What is a PBM? You know, we're not artists, we're not doing roofs and siding, we do plumbing, we do eligibility, we do, you know, take your pick of data integration with your point solutions, we print cards, we do call center integration, PA workflow, formulary management, network, billing, reimbursement, accumulators under affordable care. These are plumbing enterprise solution things, and people have forgotten it. What is a traditional PBM? It's a hedge fund for drugs.
A lot of employers work with benefit consultants, and benefit consultants essentially, you know, are sort of gatekeepers. How does CapRx get to them?
Yeah, so we work with, you know, I'd like to say a select group. I don't necessarily agree with everybody, shocking. But I think what's important to remember is you want to find the people that don't have conflicts of interest and have alignment. And so the market is vast. I often say, if you look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, self-insured is probably 30,000 entities in the United States. If you look at the health plan side, regional carriers, you probably have another 300 or so. If you were to look at municipalities and other things, again, it's a vast ocean that you can access. And everybody uses at one point some sort of advisor or consultant. I learned a long time ago, just avoid the people that you just don't have alignment with, and let's be frank, they have some really strong relationships and make a lot of money, and that's capitalism, so I get it. So we focus on the ones that have the alignment, and there's plenty out there.
Let's talk about the federal government. I know we spoke of FTC, but I want to talk about Medicare and their ability now to negotiate certain drug prices. And then, of course, they've capped the price of insulin at $35. So the question is, do PBMs see the writing on the wall? Do drug makers see the writing on the wall that if they don't change, then the government is going to clamp down on more and more categories of drugs?
You know, I think manufacturers have a conundrum here because they lost control of the supply chain over the last 15 years, and it's almost impossible to get it back if they continue to do whatever they've been doing for the last 10 years, which is paying for access through traditional PBMs. So I think that they're trying to probe and find a way, but they're in the witness protection program, I often say, pharma, because if you step out of line and someone sees you, you're going to be shot. And so, pharma has a difficult road to navigate. So I think where this becomes helpful is when you have PBMs like us and other people in the healthcare ecosystem that are signaling, I want to give your value defined as discounts and rebates and price protection and coupons and any other form of value you're driving, 340B, whatever it may be. I don't make money on it. So if you're giving roughly 44% net is what you're left with, let's give all that other money back to the supply chains, particularly the payers is what we're focusing on. And so I think the government's inquiries are helping. But again, I think what's going to be the real transformational moment in healthcare are industry, folks in the industry like us that are, again, willing to not take the money.
You have a lot of animus against the PBMs of the world. Did you ever work there?
I never worked at a PBM. I spent 8 years in manufacturing doing really dry work. I used to do consulting to help convert old MRP systems to MRP2 and ERP. Honestly, and all I wanted was a paycheck and to pay my rent. And then I didn't realize that I was getting a world-class education on supply chain logistics and drug pricing, and it still serves me to this day. And it was probably critical to synthesize a lot of my theses, that I have, in particular, the one I always call is the Tylenol rule. People say, well, how should drug pricing work? I say, go into a pharmacy, but go to the OTC section, go to the over-counter section and reach for a bottle of, Tylenol or Advil or eye drops, and something magical happens. It doesn't matter if you're insured or uninsured. You work for the biggest employer or the smallest one. It's the same darn price. And the person that comes in right after you, go figure, it's the same price again. And the person after them, and it'll probably be that way for a quarter or two until prices change. Nothing dramatic, though, in the supply chain. But then you walk 50 feet back to the counter to fill a prescription, and hey, are you today's winner or loser in the US PBM system? And that disgusts me, and it shouldn't work that way. And I think the time has come. People are finally asking the right questions. And to be fair, when I worked in pharmaceutical manufacturing, I had no idea this is how it worked in that last hop of the supply chain. You spend an afternoon, you create a pallet of drugs that's sitting on a loading dock. It's already been pre-sold to McKesson, Cardinal, ABC. And you're just like, hey, I sold it at a unit cost. What's also interesting? We have no definitions of what a brand, a generic, a single source is, DAW handling. These are fictitious things created by the last hop in the supply chain. I have a unit cost against a drug code. That's the way everything else in the United States is paid for, from these sneakers to this chair. It has a unit cost. And you know what? Even complex things, and this is my last point on this, and you can tell I get fired up about it. Let's take one of the most complex things you could buy out there. I'm a geek at heart, so I love computer technology. So let's take NVIDIA's latest 4090 video card, GPU unit. It's the same price today in the UK as it is in the United States, as it is in any other country. It's plus or minus 1%. And someone would be like, oh, it's not hard to make a GPU. It's the hardest thing on the planet to make. Go try and make with a 5 nanometer cast, the latest architecture to do what these things do in teraflops. It's not happening. And so I point this out. Something like this can trade across the globe within 1%, but in our country, I can't get a torvastatin within plus or minus 40%. It's disgusting.
Let's end with the new generation of pharmacies that we're seeing. Cost Plus, Mark Cuban's company. There's also Amazon Pharmacy. Then there are tons of other online pharmacies out there. is it easier for them to get their message across when they're dealing directly with consumers than a cap RX where you're going through the employers and payers?
I always like to point out, if you can't tell, our job is to create a free market of pricing, and when you don't make money is I welcome anyone into our network. It's very easy. Give me an NDC 11 and a list price. There's really not anything magical that happened there, and so we welcome everybody into our network. We want anyone that has an efficient price to broadcast and provide that. And so one of the things that we look at going forward is, is it any easier or harder? I think the best place to be, again, is when you are in charge of administrating the plan, you can open up the market. I think folks have always found over the last decade, when you're looking on fulfillment, which is distribution side, eventually you hit a ceiling, and the ceiling is the big three. They don't want people to take market share. They don't want you to take money away from mail specialties because it's highly profitable. But when you have, again, someone like Capital RX that's willing to signal to the marketplace, I don't make money on drugs or fulfillment. My job is to advertise, market, and connect your price with payers and members.
Amen to that. 20 minutes are up. Thank you so much, AJ, for that wonderful discussion. Please stay in your seats for some more one-on-one conversations.